Hi, I'm Glenn, Citabana Fishing Field Team, COAF Field Team on YouTube, and we're in another round of iFishNews Fishing Podcast. It's going to be number 20 in the episode of Little Red Book of Fly Fishing, and it's going to be podcast number 39 in our series. And oh, by the way, we're switching our domain, so hopefully when you type in ifishnews.com, it'll take you to our subdomain on our website, stalkertroutfishing.com. That'll get you to the archive posts of previous podcasts. But that said, we're going to post this on YouTube and also do the audio portion into that new domain. And with that, let's go talk about what's happening this week. Okay, and this week it's going to be tips 88 through 93. But that said, before we go into the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing, let's talk about, well, some upcoming things, because yours truly knows that our viewers tend not to just want to listen to a talking head video. So we've got some recent things and happenings that yours truly and the team have been doing here in the past few weeks. And so I'll describe that for those that are listening on a podcast. And for those that are watching on the video, what we're showing is in the upper left corner. That is yours truly heading out, taking the test of the 12-foot John boat with our new motor, that 2.5 Suzuki outboard that we picked up from Portaboat. Still in the break-in period. We've got to do about 10 hours. I think got another 2 hours to go, 3 hours to go, and I think it'll be well broken in so that it can go more than just above 1/3 throttle. So keep that in mind because, well, we may be out there later on today. It's Sunday. Maybe try that little John boat out and maybe catch me some crappie. What do you say? Let's see, in the lower left corner, that's where I'm going out with a bamboo stake fishing pole, where I just wanted to see, using quality line, if he could actually just do some fly fishing with any pole. In this case, I just took a tomato stake rod or bamboo pole you get at Home Depot, and sure enough, it does work. I was able to cast it, no problems. Just had to just make a little bit of adjustment in the stiffness of the rod. But that said, it's possible. You got quality line, you can make it happen, do some fly fishing. So yes, we still hold true to what we like suggesting to other folks is first start out fly fishing. We'll work on the quality line first before you move on to, well, the fishing rod and then later the fishing reel. All right, let's see, upper right corner. This is where I'm taking the dual BFS micro fly rod. I instead have it hooked up with a BFS reel, that Cascading Zephyr reel, and just at the local pond there having a good old time, just having a chance to catch a bass or two, as well as I think I got a bluegill. So fun stuff there. Didn't have to switch to the fly reel on that rod, but it was ready to go because I bring that fly reel with me everywhere. Looking at the lower right corner, this is where I've now converted that dual BFS micro fly rod into from the BFS casting style into a fly rod. So I put on the fly reel, and it's basically a ice fishing rod, put on some ice fishing handle as well as some slip rings that allow me to move the mounting position from a casting style with a bait finesse style to a fly reel. And I'm using a 2/8 fly reel. The rod's about maybe 30, just a little bit over 3 feet. And I'm working a new place that we've never been to before. It's Airfield Trailhead and Park in Fort Worth, Texas. And what I was doing was just kind of working the little creek or river, and noticed there was some bluegills, some bluegill beds, as well as, well, I ended up catching a bass there. So do check that out as we go right into the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off with the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing, and we'll start off with number 88, Getting to the Bottom of Things. The month January, the river, Colorado's Roaring Fork. The challenge, getting flies down to sluggish trout holding close to the bottom in extremely cold water. 3 anglers tried a more conventional approach, drifting beadhead nymphs with a couple of split shot while furiously mending line to neutralize a steady current. Each caught an occasional fish, working hard for their strikes. Fourth companion seemed to have trout with every second cast, chortling at the obvious discomfort of his far less successful friends. Closer inspection revealed his novel and highly effective approach. His flies were heavily weighted with tungsten wire and a tungsten bead with about the same specific gravity as a ship's anchor. That's pretty heavy. He also pinched 2 larger split shot to his leader. The truly novel ingredient was the balsa indicator, much like an antique panfish bobber, that was large enough to stay afloat above all that weight. With this rig, our friend kept his offering, dead drifted in the zone much longer than anyone else, and he had the fish to show for it. Such a weighty assembly isn't for everyone, but when trout are hugging the bottom, it gets results. All right, well, getting to the bottom of things, and that does make sense. I've seen that especially on the blue in certain areas where I see the trout. I've got my polarized lenses or glasses on, and I can see they're very deep. And when I do a drift and the fly is well above them, I'm getting basically not a single look. But as soon as I get it into that zone, I'm starting to get into some fish. So it's a good one to keep in mind. Get some of those weighty flies, get it to the bottom, and get into the bottom things. All right, on to number 89. Time on water equals fish, part 1. I distinctly remember one spring afternoon on the Green River in Utah, fishing from Denny Breer's boat. We were well downstream from Flaming Gorge Dam in the C section, far from the weekend crowds upstream. The water was clear, yet large trout were keyed on big dry cicada patterns. That is why you go to fish the Green River. I made a shot against the bank as the boat floated downstream, and after a few seconds lifted the rod tip to fire away at the riffle behind a rock. "No, hang on, wait," said Denny. "Let that fly ride a while. Mend, keep it drifting, but keep it in the water. If it's not in the water for at least 30 seconds, that's not long enough." As if on cue, a brown trout emerged from the river bottom, then lollygagged its way downstream, nosing the back of my fly, almost like it was sniffing it for a good 30 yards as we drifted along. Finally, almost painstakingly, the trout wrapped his choppers around the bug with deliberation, and I set the hook. It turned out to be the biggest fish I caught, or have since caught, on the Green River. We often hear the adage that flies in the air have never caught a trout, and it's true. Too much casting can be a bad thing, but flies in the water, especially when they are set up right and floating through the feeding lanes, are never a bad thing. Fishing from a drift boat allows you to keep those flies on the water longer, which is why you do it. Set them up correctly, then let them ride for as long as they can. And then let them ride for as long as they float, and for as long as you can manage them. After all, explained Denny, time on the water equals fish. Keep that in mind wherever you fish. After all, explained Denny, time on the water equals fish. Keep that in mind wherever you fish, whether you're in a boat or not. Okay, excellent. Time on the water equals fish, part 1. Well, let's go on to number 90. Time on the water equals fish, part 2. The time on the water equals fish axiom has a dual purpose. Pertaining to the angler, there is simply no substitute for experience. No book, magazine, or news article, video, or DVD can ever take the place of the hands-on learning value of actually being on the trout river, soaking it all in, and seeing how this game unfolds firsthand. Reference resources can be helpful primers, and good ones can shorten the learning curve dramatically. But in the end, fly fishing for trout becomes an innate endeavor. You develop instincts. You learn to know where to look for trout. You learn to cast as a reflex reaction. You sense a trout's presence. You anticipate a strike before it happens. You recognize the slightest motions and telltales. You know where a trout will turn during a fight. In the end, this doesn't have a real impact until you see it and experience it for yourself. You will ultimately be your own best coach after a long period of trial, error, and experience. Terry Gunn, owner of Lee's Ferry Anglers Fly Shop and Guide Service on the west side of the Colorado River in Marble Canyon, Arizona, once told me that an angler doesn't get really good until he learns how to teach himself, and he realizes that he's doing it right. It might seem like a long way off, but it happens to everyone who sticks with this game. Sooner or later, the game shifts from the mind to the gut, and you'll catch more fish. The key is to spend your time reinforcing good habits and techniques. Spend your time wisely. Squander your experiences by replaying bad habits, and you'll never get much better. But improve in incremental bites, and every time you hit the water, and success will become second nature. Time on water equals fish. All right, some good advice. Like in this little red book of fly fishing. On to number 91. Switch bugs on an obvious refusal. All right, well, let's see what this one has to say. August on the Henry's Fork, the Gratiot School of Fly Fishing, can be cruel. Hatches are sparse, and on hot days, your best chances for trout in the vaunted Railroad Ranch section often revolve around throwing hoppers and other terrestrial patterns. Indian jewelry, as author angler Renee Harrop described them one evening over beers at the A-Bar in the Last Chance, Idaho. Nevertheless, I found myself pressing forward one morning with guide Bob Lamb. We spotted a riser on the bank, and I let the cast fly. It was a good shot, well in front of the fish with no drag on the fly. We saw the fish poke his nose toward the bug, then plunge back into the depths behind a rock. I lit up to fire another cast. "Hold on, wait," Bob said, literally grabbing the rod during my back cast. He didn't like that fly the first time on a good cast. What makes you think he's going to change his mind? So we paused, and Bob reached into his fly box for a slightly different hopper pattern. He tied it on, and as he did so, the fish rose again. "Now try him," Bob said. Same cast, same drift, and this time that fish chewed it up. We hooked and landed him. It's a natural reaction to want to try again after you've just missed a big fish, but the point is that you need to make a slight adjustment, especially if you did everything right the first time. In those cases, change the offering. Tom Whitley, a great guide in the Denver area, says he changes his fly pattern down a size after an obvious refusal. Don't show them the same thing the same way. Adjust, trick the trout. That's what this game is all about, isn't it? All right. Okay, so that does make sense. So cast and everything was good, refused it, so make an adjustment. Let's not repeat the same offering twice. Okay, on to number 92, one at a time. Here's a common scenario that leaves most anglers scratching their head in frustration at one point or another. You're on a classic dry fly run, and it seems as if 100 trout are gulping away at the insects on the surface. You make a cast in one direction, but wait, there's another one. Lift, swish, land the fly. He's gone. But there's one. Cast again, and you're doing it all wrong. Scatter shoot. You're casting a pod of rising fish, and you're effectively being everywhere and nowhere. Pick one target and stay on it, preferably moving from the back of the school forward. If you're good, you can pick them off one at a time. The trout won't notice anything that's happening behind them, but they will notice everything in front of them. Lock onto a target, be patient, time your cast, and go. As Terry Gunn once told me, casting at a pod of rising fish is like shooting into a flock of quail with a shotgun. You'll inevitably miss them all. Pick one, measure your shot, and squeeze the trigger. You might get lucky when you flock shoot, but for the most part, you're only busting sky. In the case of trout fishing, if you get wild with your cast and don't focus on one fish, you'll only add to your frustration by losing the whole opportunity. Everywhere gets you nowhere. Okay, so one at a time, one at a time. I've been dove hunting, quail hunting, pheasant hunting, and yes, don't shoot at the flock. Pick one out, and I'll do the same thing with some trout. It makes sense to me as well. All right, some more good advice from the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. Okay, I think this one's going to be the last one, this episode, number 93. Stack mending for drifts. As long as your flies are floating naturally and the drift is good, there's no rule against multiple mends to cover lots of water. In fact, in big rivers like the Colorado at Lee's Ferry in Arizona, and up on Oregon's Deschutes. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. But anyways, stack mending for long drifts is a smart way to fish. Make your casts, let your flies settle, and then make your mend. As the flies float downstream, make another mend, feeding more line as you go, then another, and another. Meet out line gently by wiggling the rod tip to feed line through the guides, and at the same time, don't get caught up with so much slack that you cannot set the hook when your indicator stalls 50 or 60 feet away from you. It can be tricky. The key is making many small, gentle mends as you feed your line through the run. Okay, looks like we've got number 94 going to be coming up here. I'm just going to leave that for next time. And that said, that's episode number 20 of our podcast series, Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. And just to recap, this week's tips were 88 through 93. Getting to know the bottom of things. Time on the water equals fish part 1. Time on the water equals fish part 2. Switch bugs on an obvious refusal. One at a time. Stack mending for drifts. Okay, all for now this round. Do check back. We're going to be going through tips 94 through 99 next round in our ongoing iFishNews fishing podcast, Little Red Book of Fly Fishing series. That's right. Till next time, we'll catch y'all later. Good luck and good fishing.